Welcome to QandA, the live and unpredictable forum where you get to ask the questions. With me to supply the answers is the former Minister for Ageing, now Shadow Minister for Justice, Christopher Pyne. Cheryl Kernot, the one-time leader of the Australian Democrats who famously moved to the Labor Party in 1997, now returned from an academic post at Oxford University. We're also joined by TV's brainiest star, the host of SBS Rock Quiz, Julia Zemiro, and the Assistant Treasurer, many tipped to move to the top job one day, Chris Bowen, and the outspoken Liberal and monarchist Nick Adams. Please welcome our panel. Before tonight's programme, our audience put forward the questions they'd like to ask the panel. We've chosen those we think are the best. But the members of the panel haven't seen any of those questions. They'll be answering them off the cuff. Just to remind you, Q&A is live between 9:30 and 10:30 p.m. Eastern Australian time. You can also send your name, address and questions via the web at abc.net.au/Q&A or by SMS to the number on your screen, 197 552 197 552. Let's go now to our very first question. It's from Diane Hiles.
Is tinkering around with 5 cents on excise missing the bigger picture? Is our standard of living sustainable in the light of diminishing oil supplies? And what can be done to future-proof working families so that petrol prices don't make the gap between rich and poor get even wider?
OK, that phrase, working families, again, Cheryl Kernot, it's been a long time between questions. I'll start with you.
You won't find me saying working families 5 million times. I just am incapable of doing it. What worries me about the absolutely current discussion on oil prices is that we're still talking about finding more of it instead of looking for alternative, longer-term renewable fuel options. And, you know, there's a lot of modelling around now that says that wind in the next, say, 30 years can be as inexpensive as oil. And I think for the last 30 years, we've known this is coming. I heard ABC Radio today an interview with the Iranian fuel minister saying, we better find alternatives, this is going to run out in 30 years. Well, 30 years is here, and the governments of the last 30 years, I think, haven't taken it seriously enough. I don't think we can sugarcoat the pill and pretend that it will never happen. We have to be doing something much more intelligent, and we have to be doing it more urgently. Yes, it's hurting, and yes, it may have to hurt more. But if we'd had, I think, different leadership over the last 30 years, instead of our usual attitude, it'll all work out in the end and technology will fix everything.
Hang on, you were there for part of that time.
I know I was, but I wasn't in government, was I? And we were talking about alternative energy. All that time we were. OK. Let's go to Nick Adams. I want to hear from the rest of the panel.
Look, I'd like to firstly say that I sympathise greatly with the plight of many working families across Sydney, and indeed everyone. Everyone knows that when you go to the Bowser these days, it's a phenomenal price that you pay. And I think that it's important to acknowledge that at the very beginning of that debate.
Sort of apologise, you mean?
Well, look, the point that I'd make, Tony, is that we were told quite frequently in the lead up to the 24th of November last year, when we had a transition of government, we were told by our now Prime Minister, Kevin Rudd, that he would do everything that he could in order to ease the squeeze, to use Mark Latham's old term, ease the squeeze on petrol prices. And I think we've found that, unfortunately, to this point, our Prime Minister hasn't really delivered. Essentially, from what I can understand, the Prime Minister came to the Australian public and he said, there are a lot of problems with Australia right now, and I am the ammunition you need to fix those problems. And the Australian people took him on his word and bestowed on him the most tremendous honour that anyone in our nation can have, and that is electing him to the political office. The Australian people took that ammunition, they put it into their shotgun, they cocked the rifle,
Whoa.
They pulled the trigger, dud.
This is very...
OK. I think you made your point, Nick Adams. Captive audience. And let me go to Julia Zemiro. I mean, do you identify as a as a member of a working family, and do you need to be future-proofed?
I'm not a working
petrol?
family, I'm afraid, Tony. I'm single. When you do drive to work, and I only started driving about 3 years ago when I was 37. And I've never driven up until then. I always called public transport because I was lucky enough to live near where I was working. I'm happy to walk places. The public transport near where I was happened to be good. But, you know, you can't deny that a lot of people love getting into their bubble of their car and they set themselves up with coffee and the food they're going to eat. They enjoy that 2-hour drive. I'm sorry, I think a lot of people enjoy it. It's their little private time to just be themselves. Oh, got to go to work, got to drag.
Alan Jones on the radio.
Whatever, or maybe a Gold 104. Who knows?
Spencer,
and you know, I think they enjoy that, and I think we're still in love with petrol in our cars, and I think, you know, you should be able to. If we had to stop tomorrow, if the government said you can only have petrol for 2 days a week, we'd find a way. There's no frugality anymore. We don't understand that thing of going, you know, you don't have to drive everywhere. Yes, some people do, but you just don't. And if it was enforced on you, you'd find a way to go, I can cut back on this. And it'll only happen when it gets to, you know, $1.70, which it has.
I have something else. You don't have to have oil.
Christopher Pyne, I want to hear from you because the opposition stands accused of tinkering around here. It's the 5 cents a litre is what you've promised to cut from fuel excise. Do you agree, in fact, with your colleague Chris Pearce that should be doubled to 10 cents a litre?
Well, the marvellous thing about opposition, Tony, there's not many upsides to opposition. Spending time with one's family is a big upside, and also the freedom that opposition brings, particularly for backbenchers, is a big plus. So Chris Pearce's suggestion of doubling it to 10 cents is entirely allowed to make that suggestion, and whether it's taken up, of course, is a matter for the shadow cabinet and the party room. I think Emily was, asked the question. The point that Diane made a very good point about the future and thinking about the future. The 5 cents a litre cut to excise shows that we understand the pain that not just working families, but pensioners,
how much
pain
would that relieve a working family of, an average working family of, in a week?
Well, what it demonstrates is that the coalition understands that we have to do something about petrol prices.
That was a specific question.
It's much more than just, you know, how much is it going to save?
It's reckoned it would be $2. Well,
showing that
petrol prices go up,
demonstrating that we have done more than the Labor Party, which is to say, get us elected and we'll fix the problem, we'll fix grocery prices, we'll fix petrol prices, we'll fix the climate, and then they get elected, they've discovered it's much easier to win elections than it is actually to govern. And what they're doing is nothing except watching fuel prices go up. At least we're demonstrating that we'd like to do something about it. But I think the longer-term view is, and I think human beings have the capacity and have demonstrated over millennia to change and adapt. And we will use more solar, more wind, more tidal, more hot rocks, much more renewable energy rather than what we've done, because we'll need to do it. And we will have to adapt to our circumstances.
OK, I want to bring Chris Bowen in, but before I do it, because he's the Minister responsible for Fuel Watch, I'll bring him into the discussion, but I'll interrupt the flow just for a moment, because, you know, we're very keen here on video contributions in Q&A. Let's take a look at this video advert from the Get Up organisation that arrived on our email just a few hours ago.
Here at Fuel Watch, we can tell you tomorrow's petrol price today. Hey Grant, what's the price for tomorrow?
Expensive.
That's the way. Instead of investing in alternative fuels or making cars more efficient or funding public transport, we'll take that money and invest it in newfangled binoculars that can see further into the future. Hey Mandy, what's the future look like?
Very expensive.
Fuel Watch, we can see the future, and the future's very expensive.
Make our future renewable. Authorised by Brett Solomon, Get Up Sydney.
OK.
Stop being on Gordon Ramsay.
It is Chris Bowen. I mean, Get Up campaigned heavily for the Labor Party, and they were very effective. They were very effective, for example, in the seat of Bennelong, evidently. I want to know, looking at that, are you starting to get a bit worried if Get Up turns against your idea of Fuel Watch? Is there any hope?
Oh, look, Get Up has strong views, and they express those views in a very funny way, and those views have always been different to the Labor parties on some matters and different to the Liberal parties on some matters, and they're entitled to that. They make the point that Fuel Watch